Welcome. All right, the next installment. Apologies for being a bit delayed on this, but apparently I like to talk a lot about plants. So running a bit into the soil improvement section and segment. So so this is about soil improvement and path composting. It's one of my favorite techniques that I'm sure I didn't invent, but I certainly like to use a fair bit. I use that throughout my veggie garden area, in the food forest, and also with the native gardening that I do quite extensively. And I find that makes a massive difference. So here we go. So to start off with, so when I did this food forest back in 2009, this was just a bare paddock. A lot of grass growing here. I think we had a black bean, that sort of thing. Some areas of the soil, reasonably deep. I think I had one section from doing some plantings that miraculously had around about half a meter of topsoil, but that was as a result of them throwing topsoil on top of topsoil, as opposed to that being more natural. And then other areas where it's just basically scraped down to the subsoil. I touched on that a bit in the site design side of things. So that sort of soil, your typical clay deco that you can get in the Sanford area, look, is challenging, right? It's super muddy and mucky and sticky in the wet times, and incredibly hard in the dry times. But as a subsoil, it's a great thing. It's a great thing to have. So really, the key thing is creating organic matter for your plants to be able to live on top of and consume. And I started with that, essentially creating mounds. So I lined up on contour. I can sort of see, this is an example of one that was fairly extreme. All the trees are pretty much in a line. So I lined up using grass as a marker ladder. I had a ladder. I had a level, just to give me the rough contour, and I put out grass. And then I would, in each of the areas that I was going to plant, I essentially dug down, used manures. I used rock dust, grasses and stuff like that. If I was going to be planting right away, then I try to make sure that it was more composted stuff to begin with. If I was going to let it sit there for a bit, then I would do a layered activity. So this is an example of some of the manure that I might have used. This is actually pig and sheep. I didn't have access to that at that stage, but this is what I've got access to recently. I used a lot of this. So this is a greenstone crusher dust. So why did I use that? My soil is the subsoil is decomposed granite, otherwise known as deco. So that contains potassium, some calcium, that sort of thing. But I was missing, more of the basalt kind of goodies, your phosphorus, that sort of thing. So what I didn't want to do is bring in a whole bunch more decomposed granite to try to improve my soils. I wanted to use what I was missing. So understanding the types of soil that you have is an important part of the process relating to improving it, because there's no point in spending money and adding stuff that you've already got when that's not needed. So I also use some animal parts and stuff like that. These poor animals that get hit by a car on the side of the road. You know, instead of flies coming consuming them, if I see them, I've got my trailer, then I'll grab them, dig a hole, and put them in. I think it's a much better use of an animal than just leaving them by the side of the road. So that's some of the stuff that I did for that. I used a lot of grass, and obviously I had a lot of grass on the property. This was the next dairy farm, so hey, you know, they planted grass. So I mowed a lot of that. Try to get manure from other people in the area. Let me just show you a bit of an example over here, maybe. So this is quite an old path here, and you can see the quality of the soil. Oops, sorry. Let's actually try to show what I'm touching there. So look, this is pretty good stuff, right? Very friable. Pretty much I think a poster child. In fact, we've got a couple of worms. We've got a worm here. Oh, poor wormy. I cut him in half. Sorry about that. So, and I've got a whole bunch of Pinto's peanut. So I find as a living mulch, soil improvement. Look, this is a great way to go. I just don't mow over this path. You know, you could sort of argue, is that actually a path? That's a coffee plant growing across the path. You have to sort of duck down in there a bit. But the Pinto's peanut makes such a great living mulch that the worms and stuff like that are really happy with. You can see here, this is more of some of the original soil. You can see the difference in color, right? That's more of what I was dealing with before. But again, as a result of all this other stuff on top of it, you can just see how beautifully friable that still is, even though it's not quite as good quality. Now, if I was to, you know, if I was to plant a plant in here, then I'd just be mixing up those layers, you know, a bit more, and getting all that carbon and organic matter in there makes such a difference to your plant and your well-being. Its well-being. So I'm going to show you another example over here. So this is my recently moved white sapote that I spoke about in another segment. It basically, what I did with this is I took a number of coffee grounds, I took some organic matter from my paths in here, and I'll talk a bit more about the path composting in a sec, and I built this up. And I don't know if you can quite get the appreciation of just how much this is built up, but it's quite significant. It's probably around about 400 mils at this stage, and I've put a ton of logs and stuff like that all around there. Now, I do that for a couple of reasons. One, we've got chooks free ranging through the whole orchard. I don't have any snake issues in my food forest whatsoever. Not that there's anything wrong with snakes, but obviously it's not something that you want to be grabbing hold of as you're going in and gardening. And I think that the fact that I've got the chooks and the ducks that can come through here fairly regularly is a bit of a deterrent for them. Right? So the downside is they love to scratch, right? And there's nothing wrong with the chook scratching, except for when they're, you know, scratching away at the soil that you've just piled up around your plant. So I put a whole bunch of these logs and stuff like that. That acts as a good deterrent. You know, I basically start to put in some of the Pinto's peanut in there. And, you know, I've even got a bit of a pigeon pea growing in through here. Certainly when the orchard first started out, I used a lot of pigeon pea as well. And so that's one of the techniques I use for first establishment. But in through here, you can just see, I mean, look at this. These are composting worms. Boom. Now, this was not staged. Here they are. And they're just loving life. They're doing what you would typically see them do in a worm farm. So I don't have any worm farms. I just use my whole orchard as a big worm farm for basically providing nutrients in place to my trees. So these are some nice palm trunks. People throw those out at the tip all the time, which is great because I take them in my trailer and I bring them here. And these are a bunch of other things that I would have gotten from the tip. These look like jacarandas. bit of a weed. But hey, man, they make a great a great barrier. It's also a fantastic place for fungi. So let me just see if I can quickly find over here. As you can see here, this is, you know, a bunch of this, again, soil improvements here. I've got all these logs, stuff like that. This is quite a biggie here. You see how big that bad boy is. Again, I kind of use that all along the edges. This was Camphophora logs that we got on one stage. I use them all along the edges. Now I'm starting to do a bit of a new compost, path composting thing here. That's why all the stuff is here. So I've just thrown up a bunch of these logs that used to be on the side here. So here you can see I've got some nice fungi growing there. Some other good examples over here of some nice fungi. And you know, mycorrhizal associations are really important for your trees. So the more you provide a fungal type environment for your fruit trees, the better off that they're going to be. So I definitely like to do that. I'm gonna get my shovel. So one of the other things that I use a lot of these days, Pintos peanut, suitable in smaller spaces. Yes, it absolutely is suitable in smaller spaces. It's very well behaved, and it's quite easy to plant as well. So you can see this runner here. What I do when I plant it is I take a nice segment like that. This is where I put in a couple of cassava plants in here. You can see them. Cassava plant right there. Another cassava plant there. All right. So when I plant the Pintos peanut, so I take a nice little thing there, get my shovel, just spear it right down, right down, give it a bit of a wiggle, right? So I've created a nice little gap in there, and then I take this guy and I just shove it in with my hands. So I get a nice little sort of U thing going on. So I've got, as a result of that, from that one cutting, I've got 2 growing points, and those that will very happily turn into a plant. Well, already is a plant, but it'll take off there and continue the odyssey. So so that works really well. What else we got? Okay, microbes. So I probably in about the last 3 years or so, I've really been going quite heavy on the microbes. So I've got a 5-liter container there, a classic spray one, which unfortunately more often than not contains chemicals. Mine only contains some foliar fertilizer or microbes, and it's really simple. So you can take, maybe a bit of compost tea, something like that, just a bit of liquid from that, and then put in there. And I don't do measurements, unfortunately. I put one of these annoying things, but I just put like the smallest drip of fish emulsion, and then probably about 3 to 4 times the molasses in there, and then the rest with water. So there's barely any, right? And it's just a cold brew. And every couple of days, I will spray that around. You'd never know necessarily that, this grass here. You see this? It's all grass. This has been down for weeks, right? And it's breaking down beautifully. Grass is typically is very susceptible to being hydrophobic. So you can put a lot of grass down an area and you think that you're doing your soil a favor. In actual fact, you're creating a really water repellent situation where the soil just literally will not take any water in, and it just beads everything away. With microbes, I never ever have that issue, and I spray it all over the wood and stuff like that as well, and that all helps to create really great fungal situations as well. and tons of microorganisms and stuff like that. So again, you saw over there where I had done the lifted back that palm trunk, and there was a whole bunch of composting worms. There's composting worms throughout here. So I've just recently I got some grass clippings from some relatives of my wife's. They've got a contract, grass cutting contract company, and we've only got a couple of bits from them. But anyway, instead of them bring it to the tip, bring it here. And look, the chooks have been having a wonderful time spreading all this around. And I I spray it with microbes and stuff as well. So to give you a bit of an example over here, again, see all the composting worms through here? They are just happy as. Now there's a difference here when I've got a container over there. Chooks aren't scratching all over the place, and what happens versus them scratching. But look, they like to have fun. We don't feed them much of anything. They can get the food from their chook house during the day, but they're just free ranging. They're getting all this great protein and stuff like that, and having a lovely time. You can sort of see, apologies for the light, I might sort of change the perspective here. You can see here the logs. This is one of the photos that we had for the intro to the property. And these are all palm logs, and they're going to break down into this beautiful organic matter. Just lovely. And let me just this is a new path composting process. I'll take you through that in just a little bit, some of the stuff that goes on here. But look, this is an example. This is a palm tree log that's just sort of cut, so I just put them up like that, and then just look at the stuff that you get. Oh, there's a bunch of cane toads. These can be fertilizer, but let's put them in there. Look at all this stuff in there. Again, beautiful material, and you can see that some roots are coming right in this. Yeah, look, I love all that. It's pretty neat. You can just see some of the stuff, kind of slowly breaking down. They start in the hearts first, right, and they move to the outside. And then what I'll even do in here, I've got some of the banana, when the bananas come out, they have these kind of covers over them, so I'll just whack those in there. Again, a little composting system. Got some more in there, and away you go. You can see over here, this is a sort of a classic path before I start to do some of the path composting on that. With the design of the orchard, I had always planned to do these kind of mounds and swales where the plants were, and then to bring everything back to unify the level, and potentially even go higher again for these main paths, and just this continual soil buildup process. Again, it's hard to see from this phone, but this video is just how much the soil has been built up. This driveway is kind of like the quote-unquote natural, at least the natural in terms of what we got when we came here. But since then it's been built up quite considerably. So this driveway is really going to be a low point over time, more and more, versus what's going on in the overall orchard. So this is the latest path here that I've been doing the path composting on. So again, I had a bit of a dump from the relatives, Vanessa's relatives. We've also put a whole bunch of bamboo stuff, so the kids were quite happy to sweep all the bamboo leaves off of the driveway, and we just threw and piled it up here. So bamboo is actually a great resource for building all that stuff. Under here we've got some Maria cuttings and some other palm leaf stuff. But look, I just pile all that stuff on top of there, right? And I put weeds. Like, I put the only weed that I won't put here is anything like mint that is quite happy in this kind of environment and will spread rapidly. But I'll put wandering Jew. That is a bit of a trickier one to sort of keep on top of if you don't really want. This is the native one, but I also have, unfortunately, some of the non-natives. It's fine in the native areas, and I'll put it around there, but I don't like it in other areas. and chop and drop. So this over here, when I started the first talk, I started from in this tree. So this is an ice cream bean, classic chop and drop with permaculture. And as you just have to remember to keep on top of it, because otherwise it does get massive. And I did do some trimming on this most recently. But just pile all that stuff on there. And this will break down to be beautiful, beautiful stuff. And I'll even put you know, some of the poor quality soil and stuff like that over this, that I'm mixing, you know, the nice organic matter with the poor quality soils and stuff like that. If I'm digging a hole in a certain area, I'll do that. So yeah, this is I guess some of the soil improvement techniques that I've done, and you know, I find it works really well for me. I just love the fact that I can literally walk on top of my composting system. So I'm not, you know, having to save a separate space for that. I'm not having to, you know, do something in one area and then, oh, I remember I got to take it now to another area. If I do want to harvest material, I just dig up along the path. So these days, typically the place that we go that I do that, the digging up on the path, is in the veggie garden, because that's where I first started this technique. And it worked so well there that's where we harvest from. But yeah, look, hopefully this was of value and gave some potentially new or different ideas for people to try. So thank you very much for joining. Bye.